Good morning, and welcome to Toronto. Welcome to Ontario, welcome to Canada. All right, first off, how many Canadians in the room? Oh my gosh, there's a lot of you. I can't make fun of you this morning then. I wouldn't do that. I've been working with Canadians for the last 2 years up at Hydro One. And Canadians are great, and the employees of Hydro One have been fantastic. I will tell you, being in the industry as long as I have, when you send your people for mutual aid and mutual assistance assignments, typically that's when our industry comes together the best, and you get a lot of great feedback. Well, I will tell you, and I've always gotten great feedback, I have, in the 3 utilities in the US that I've worked at. However, when we sent our Hydro One employees to the States, and we've done it a number of times over the last couple of years, when we sent them down to Florida, we got this letter from one of the managers down there. She wrote a handwritten letter and she said, "Your Hydro One team was aces. They were the best, most productive, most safe. They were ready to asking for more work constantly, etc." I had never received a letter like that in my entire career. Couldn't be more proud of Hydro One employees. They're dedicated, they're committed, as all Canadians are. So great to be your host utility. Duke and Quanta Services, thank you. It's been a pleasure supporting you in this conference, and I know it's going to be great. This is the second time this conference is in Canada. It was back in Vancouver a few years ago, but I think this is also the most highly attended conference out of 16 years of doing utility perspectives. So again, welcome to Toronto and Ontario. So certainly appreciate Canadians have a huge deference and respect for Indigenous peoples. Matt already talked about and acknowledging the land that we are on here today, and this is my slide in doing that as well. That's the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat, as well as the Mississaugas of the New Credit. So Toronto is the capital of Ontario. For you non-Canadians, it's not the capital of Canada. What's the capital of Canada? Ottawa. It is the most populous city, almost 3 million people. Toronto is very much like Chicago, having spent a couple of years in Chicago. It is the most diverse city in the world. Literally, I have 5 train stops on my way to work every morning. I live about 2 blocks from here in Yorkville. I'm fortunate enough to do that. And hopefully, if you've gotten around over the last couple of days, you see how beautiful it is up here in the Yorkville area. I have 5 train stops. It takes me about 15 minutes. And I will tell you, as I look left and right on that train car, I'm literally one of 5 white males. This is a very, very diverse city. There's over 8,000 restaurants, many Hollywood movies. I've personally seen Kiefer Sutherland 3 times and a number of other actors in many of the local restaurants here. It's home of the Toronto International Film Festival. Big deal every year in the month of September. It actually just ended. Second highest population of Italians. Why is that important to me? Because there are great Italian restaurants here. In Yorkville alone, there's a dozen in the 2 blocks that encompass this area. It's hard to keep your weight down if you live here, I will tell you. What's better than Italian food? Did you taste that ravioli last night in the bolognese sauce? Was that great or what? Was it not? Love the Italians. My wife is in the back of the room. She's an Italian, so that's why I'm making the big deal about the Italian thing. So who was at CN Tower yesterday? Did you do the edge walk? No, you didn't. Why? Because you have to make reservations in advance. That's how many people want to do that. Look, I've been to the top of the Willis Tower, 110 stories up, walked right to the edge of the building, and the wall is only this high. Literally, a strong breeze could blow you over. I looked right over, 110 stories up, and I was okay. But I will not do that. I will not do that from a harness. I've been dropped on top of a transmission tower from a helicopter, but I will not do that edge walk. I'm afraid. I actually went up on the CN Tower with the family, and I was apprehensive about walking onto the glass and looking straight down. St. Lawrence Market is an excellent market, one of the top 10 markets in the world. Royal Ontario Museum. Toronto is a very proud city of its sports teams. The Toronto Raptors were doing fantastic until Cleveland came to town. The Maple Leafs, you do know they're one of the 6 original NHL teams, right? So the Maple Leafs are to Toronto what the Blackhawks are to Chicago, what the Rangers are to New York. They're one of the original. Great sports town. Lots of enthusiastic sport fans. And the Blue Jays, who can tell me, they've won 2 World Series. What years? 92, 93. So we actually did win 2 World Series, long time ago. Having a tough season this year. So let me tell you a little bit more about Ontario and Canada. 10 provinces and 3 territories. Ontario itself, 415,000 square miles. And Hydro One, we are the transmission company in Ontario. So we serve all of that 415,000 square miles. So imagine the long radial transmission feeds that go up into northern Ontario, as well as distribution feeds. But if you think about the size of the territory, combine California and Texas, and that's how big Ontario is. Everybody thinks of Canada as a cold place, and Toronto as a cold place. Well, guess what? Minneapolis, Milwaukee, a number of other towns, you are more north of Toronto, and it's certainly a whole lot colder there. It is the most populous Canadian province, with 14 million people, about 38% of Canada's population. Think about it. California, just less than 40 million people, has more people than all of Canada. All of Canada. And then you can see the temperatures here. The winters here are kind of just like Chicago, if any of you are familiar with that. So it can get cold, it can get a lot of snow. We had a pretty tough winter this last winter, and it was a lighter winter the year before, and it's certainly hot and humid in the summer, and we've done pretty good on our load and our revenues so far this past summer. Let me tell you a little bit about the evolution of Hydro One. So Hydro One only became an investor-owned utility just short of 3 years ago. It's a 100-plus-year-old government-run organization. Sir Adam Beck was the original founder of the Hydroelectric Power Commission of Ontario. You probably remember the old Ontario Hydro, vertically integrated utility, generation, transmission, and distribution, although there's a lot of LDCs yet. We'll talk about that later. So it became Ontario Hydro in 1973, and then competition was brought about in the late 90s, and essentially the service was unbundled. So now Ontario Power Generation became the generator, Hydro One was created, and a number of other authorities that you see here as well. So we actually don't serve Toronto. We are everything outside of Toronto. So if the lights do go out today, Toronto Hydro, are you in the room? Because it's your responsibility. But we feed more than 30 stations that feed Toronto, so we're responsible as well. We would never shrug our responsibility. So things have evolved, still a Crown Corporation through the 90s and the early 2000s. A little consolidation there in 2005 with the Ontario Power Authority being created, and then ultimately merging with the IESO, the Independent System Operator. And then in November 2015, we consummated the IPO and became an investor-owned utility. And it's been pretty rocky ever since. And we're going to talk about that. I'm sure you've heard about that in the news. It was the 4th largest IPO in Canadian history. And I'll talk in a moment about a couple of more things there as well. And you know we have the pending Avista acquisition. So we want to be a North American utility, and we need to close yet Washington, Oregon, and Idaho in terms of getting regulatory approval, and then the Avista acquisition will be complete. So we're the new Hydro One. We've got new values, and I think it's best described by our employees. So, as Warner Wolf says, let's go to the videotape. Love that video, love our employees that talk about the company so passionately. There's so much pride in the industry of employees, but boy, I've never seen pride like I've seen in the Hydro One employees about what it is they do every day. We've had an incredibly rocky storm year. In a matter of 6 weeks, back in April and May, we had 3 storms encompassing 1.4 million customers, essentially more than our whole customer base. And then just recently, and one of my VPs, Darlene Bradley, is going to share a presentation shortly, we had a number of tornadoes touch down in the Ottawa area and literally take out one of our transmission stations, as well as 500,000 customers. And we got them all restored. 97% of those customers restored in 2 days over the weekend. So these employees really know how to come together for our customers. So this is who we are. We're in red. We are a pure play T&D company. We're a wires company, transmission and distribution. We take the power that Ontario Power Generation and other independent power producers produce, and we transmit it and deliver it to our own 1.3 million distribution customers, as well as other LDCs, and there's about 55 local distribution companies yet. Small companies, 5,000, 10,000 employees, up to Toronto Hydro, who has 750,000 employees, and Electra, one of the newest formed LDCs that was a combination of 4 utilities, and they have 1 million customers. So there's a lot of LDCs out there yet, and the industry and the province is still very ripe for consolidation. But this is who we are and how we play in Ontario. This is a little bit about our transmission system. So we own and operate 98% of the transmission assets. You can see some of the statistics there. We have many industrial customers directly connected to our transmission system who provide a significant portion of our revenues every year. And then again, we have some LDCs that are connected directly to our transmission system as well. About 30,000 circuit kilometers of high voltage transmission lines and towers. So it's pretty significant. System is fully automated. The transmission system, lots of visibility. And I would say when we look at our SAIDI safety results, we're a top-tier utility when it comes to transmission and our transmission system. A little bit different on our distribution system. So here's some of the stats here. We have more poles than we do customers. So imagine pole lines going for 100 kilometers, only feeding a couple customers. We are a rural utility. We service customers and we have an obligation to serve, so there are many radial feeds that go up into northern Ontario. When that line comes down, there's no way to get power back until we call people out and they respond in any condition and put those wires back up. And sometimes it can take a while. It can take a while. Our distribution SAIDI is too embarrassing to share. And I don't take that lightly. We measured in hours, where many of you probably measured in minutes. Well, our goal is to reduce our distribution SAIDI by an hour this year, an hour next year, and an hour the year after that. And we will still be 4th quartile after we do that. But I think, for whatever reason, and I'm not criticizing the past, for whatever reasons that came together, we did not invest in the distribution system. We invested in the transmission system, but not the distribution system. So it is not automated. There's a couple of switches out there, and what did we find? We've bypassed those switches. We don't even use them. We have no communications to them. We did a pilot 5 years ago in the Owen Sound area, and we automated 1% of the distribution system. We said, let's try everything. Let's put all the technology that's out there in that one area. And we did it, and we got the results we expected. Safety and SAIDI improved tremendously, and then we didn't do anything about it. We didn't take those learnings and apply it to the rest of the distribution system. Well, we are now, and the person most responsible for executing that grid modernization is my VP of planning, and she's in the room. And she and her team are leading that charge. That reason of lack of automation and trees are the 2 biggest reasons why our SAIDI is what it is. Almost half of our SAIDI minutes last year, almost half, were due to trees. Well, when you don't trim your trees, what do you expect? We were on a 10-year cycle. The first thing we did was move to a 3-year cycle. We brought a few experts in, some folks from the US who have this program in place already. They worked with our forestry team. Another interesting fact, we have an in-house forestry team. We may be the only one in North America. I have 500 full-time forestry people, and then we bring on another 800 temporary forestry people during the year to do our tree trimming. They are very good at what they do, and they follow direction very, very well. But we were on a 10-year cycle. Well, when trees grow on a 3 to 4 year cycle, you know what happens. So we are just finishing year 1 of that new 3-year cycle, and we're already an hour below as we had predicted on our SAIDI. So we're going to save an hour this year, and then we're going to continue to do that. So trees and automation are the 2 biggest reasons. And I don't want to say that, boy, we forgot about our distribution customers. But we've got to pay attention because they're more important than ever. We're going to talk about that for the next day and a half, how important distribution customers are. They want more choice. They want their grid modernized. Otherwise, if they have a choice in the future to discard their utility, they'll jump at that opportunity, and we don't want to let them do that. So lots of challenges yet on our distribution system. So we've been in the news. So the IPO was consummated in November of 2015. But many, many things have happened to us, and some not so positive. Ombudsman, we have an on-site ombudsman that facilitates customer complaints. We had a lot of problems with our billing system a few years back, and it literally resulted in tens of thousands of complaints. We largely fixed that, but that refers to the one headline there. Lots in the news about executive compensation. How about the one on the bottom right? So 2 months ago, our CEO and board resigned en masse. Now, that may not be news for some Canadian utilities. That has happened before when the political powers change in a crown corporation, which is government-run, government-owned. And that's what we were. Now, the province of Ontario still owns 47% of the shares of Hydro One. So they're the single largest majority shareholder. But otherwise, institutional investors own our stock, residential consumers own our stock, etc. So we sold our company off in 3 tranches to where now the province holds 47%. And by law, they have to continue to own 40% of the company. Now, they could change that by enacting a new law. Our financial results have been strong. We're having a really good year. We've reported that out. There's been a lot of turmoil, though, in the politics and the shift. So it was just announced recently by the Premier Ford and the Ford administration to pull back on the Green Energy Act. Well, many aspects of the Green Energy Act were already implemented. That was in 2009. So coal is no longer burned here in Ontario. Natural gas is, but not a huge quantity. Much of our electricity that's produced here is nuclear and hydroelectric, and then a mix of renewables, and certainly a little bit of natural gas. I mentioned Avista, so hopefully we can close that transaction by the end of the year. And in the midst of all of this, we're just trying to do the right thing. We're trying to manage things like this: 4 dead in Hydro One helicopter crash in Tweed. So we lost a pilot and 3 construction workers. I'll share with you what I've shared publicly and what we know about it, because we've been working with the Transportation Safety Board. A tool bag that was either laying on a platform on the helicopter or that was attached to a railing on the helicopter may have come loose. That tool bag, as they were transporting people from one location to another, literally blew off and blew into the tail rotor of the helicopter and took a chunk out. And once that happens, there's tremendous vibration and instability. The pilot did his best to try and control, but ultimately the helicopter went down and we lost 4 employees. Now, having been in the industry, and many of you in the industry, helicopter crashes happen. They're pretty rare, but they do happen. And they don't all result in fatalities, but certainly this one did. Probably the most traumatic event in Hydro One's history. We did the press conferences, we've talked with employees. It was a pretty difficult situation for many months. And December 14th of last year is when it happened, and we're coming up on that 1-year anniversary in a couple of months. So we're just trying to operate the business amidst all this political turmoil. But we collaborate with the government, we collaborate with all these authorities. We want to do the right thing for customers. It's about safe, reliable, affordable, and certainly clean energy for our customers. So that's a bit about Hydro One and where we're at. I know we're going to discuss a little bit more in the panel coming up. I'll get an opportunity to do that. But for now, welcome to Toronto. This is a great sign. This is right outside of City Hall. And when the Cavs swept us, they turned that sign. It didn't say Toronto, it said Lebronto. Could you imagine? That was harsh. That was harsh. Toronto's a great city. My wife and I and kids, we've been around. We've been to a Jays game. We've been to the Maple Leafs. We've been to cottage country. For those of you on the East Coast, when you go to the shore, whether you're in Cape Cod or New Jersey or New York, etc., here we say we're going to cottage country, which is essentially your lake home. And people have beautiful lakes homes, and Ontario is a province of probably thousands of lakes, right? And people love the country, and it's a beautiful country. It's flat in some areas, but it's beautiful rolling hills, etc. So if you don't get an opportunity while you're here now, if you ever come back, Ontario is a great place to visit. So with that, thanks again. I hope you're enjoying Toronto and Ontario. Welcome again, and look forward to a wonderful conference. Thank you for having us, and thank you, Duke and Quanta Services, once again.